In the heart of Abuja, life moved fast. Cars filled the streets, horns echoed from every corner, and people hurried to work with purpose in their eyes. Among them was a man named David. He worked in a large bank downtown and was well known among his colleagues for his bright smile, calm voice, and sharp suits. To many he was the picture of success, hardworking, smart, and always confident. At home he had what many men only dreamed of, a loving wife named Adaora and two beautiful children, Tamawa and Chika. Their house stood in a quiet part of the city, painted cream with a small garden at the front. Neighbors admired the couple. They called them the perfect family. David and Adaora often went to church together, smiled at people, and looked happy. But not everything that looks perfect is true. Beneath David's calm smile was a secret, one that he carried carefully in the small device he held in his hand every night. His phone. It had started months ago as a simple message on social media. A woman named Luna had commented on one of his posts. Her words were playful, funny, and bold. David replied without thinking much of it. One message became two, two became 10, and soon their chats became daily. Luna seemed different from everyone else. She laughed at his jokes, listened to his stories, and sent him messages that made him feel wanted, even when he didn't say much. At first, David told himself it was harmless. He was just talking to a friend, he thought. Everyone needed someone to talk to. But slowly Luna became more than that. Her words began to stay in his mind even when he was at work. Her messages came with warmth that made him smile in meetings, even when nothing was funny. When he came home from work, Adaora would greet him with a hug, ask how his day went, and serve him dinner. But while she talked, David's eyes often drifted to his phone, waiting for Luna's messages. Sometimes he would pretend to check work emails just to reply quickly. "Good evening, handsome banker," Luna would type. "Did you think of me today?" He would smile and answer, "You already know the answer." Adaora noticed his sudden silence during dinner. She noticed how he laughed to himself late at night when he thought she was asleep. She noticed the new perfume he started wearing, one she didn't buy. But she said nothing. She believed that love required patience and maybe he was just stressed from work. Still, a small voice inside her whispered that something was wrong. Meanwhile, David's double life grew stronger. He became addicted to the secret. When he was at work, he would check his phone under his desk to see if Luna had texted. He would leave meetings early just to call her. Her voice was smooth, confident, and full of mystery. She never told him much about herself, only that she lived in Abuja too and worked in marketing. David found that interesting. One afternoon, Luna sent him a picture. It wasn't her face, just her hand holding a coffee cup near a window. "Guess where I am?" she texted. David replied with a teasing message. He didn't notice the small gold bracelet on her wrist, the kind that looked strangely familiar. At home, Adaora began to feel the distance grow. Her husband, once full of laughter, now came home tired and distracted. Their conversations became short, their dinners quiet. Even the children noticed. "Daddy, why don't you play with us like before?" little Chika asked one night. David smiled weakly, kissed her forehead, and said, "Daddy's just busy with work." But the truth was he wasn't busy with work, he was busy hiding lies. On weekends, Adaora would cook David's favorite meals: jollof rice, fried plantain, and grilled fish. She hoped he would eat and talk like before. But he often ate quickly, saying he needed to rest. Then he would go to the living room, plug in his phone, and text Luna for hours. Adaora would stand at the doorway watching him from behind, her heart slowly breaking. Luna became the shadow between them. Every good morning from Adaora was followed by a "good morning, handsome" from Luna. Every smile at home felt weaker while every chat online felt stronger. Sometimes Luna asked him personal questions. "Does your wife know how lucky she is?" she wrote one night. David chuckled. "She knows, but I think she forgets sometimes," he replied. Luna replied, "Maybe you need someone who reminds you more often." David hesitated before answering, "Maybe I do." He didn't know that every message he sent was like a knife cutting deeper into his marriage. Days turned into weeks and David became careless. He started locking his phone with a new password. When Adaora tried to touch it, he would pull it away. He claimed it was office security policy. But deep down he knew he was hiding something fragile, something that could destroy everything he had built. One evening, Adaora stood outside their bedroom door while David spoke softly on the phone. "You make me feel alive again," she heard him say. Her heart froze. Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. When he came out, she smiled at him as if nothing had happened. That night, while David slept, she picked up his phone. Her hands shook as she opened the chat app. There it was, Luna's name at the top with hearts beside it. She scrolled through the messages, reading every word. Her tears fell silently on the screen. He had told Luna things he never told her. He had shared jokes, secrets, and even memories from their early marriage, but with another woman. Adaora felt anger rise inside her, but it wasn't the loud kind. It was quiet, deep, and sharp. She didn't scream or wake him up. Instead, she took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "So this is Luna." The next morning she acted as if nothing happened. She served him breakfast, helped the children get ready, and kissed him goodbye. But something inside her had changed. The woman who once waited for love to return had decided to take a different path. David left for work, thinking his secret was safe. He didn't know that Adaora already knew the truth. And he didn't know that the woman he had been talking to, the mysterious, sweet, and clever Luna, was about to show him something that would shake his world. As he drove away, Adaora looked at his car through the window. A small smile appeared on her face. It wasn't a smile of happiness but one of quiet strength. She whispered under her breath, "If only you knew." The day moved slowly, but Adaora's mind was sharp and steady. She had a plan forming, not to hurt him but to make him face what he had become. And while David continued to send sweet messages to Luna, believing he was in control, he didn't realize that the game he was playing had already changed hands. His secret no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her. As the weeks passed, David began to change in ways Adaora could no longer ignore. He stopped coming home early. He stopped laughing with the children. He stopped sitting at the dining table for dinner. At first he gave small excuses. "I have a late meeting, the manager asked me to stay, there's too much work this week." Adaora nodded and said, "Okay my love," every time. But inside she knew the truth. It wasn't work that kept him away. It was someone named Luna. Every night, when she sat alone in the living room, she could hear the city outside, cars, voices, music, but her heart felt quiet and empty. The chair where David used to sit now stayed cold. The laughter of her children no longer brought the same comfort. She missed the husband who used to hold her hand during evening walks, who used to whisper funny things just to make her laugh. That man felt like a memory now. David had become a stranger in his own home. He started dressing differently. He began wearing new shirts, shining his shoes more carefully, and spraying perfume before leaving for work. Perfume Adaora had never seen before. He checked his reflection in the mirror twice before stepping out. Sometimes she would ask softly, "You look nice today, where are you going?" He would smile quickly and say, "Just work things," then hurry out the door. But she wasn't fooled. One evening, while folding his laundry, Adaora found something that made her hands freeze, a lipstick mark on his shirt collar. It was faint but clear. Her chest tightened as she held the fabric close. She wanted to scream, to cry, to confront him right there. But instead, she took a deep breath and folded the shirt neatly again. She wasn't ready to fight, not yet. Instead, she decided to watch quietly. She would let him continue, let him think she knew nothing. But deep down she made a promise to herself, "I will find out who Luna is. And when I do, he will see what he has done." At the bank, David's mind was no longer on his work. Every time his phone buzzed, his eyes lit up. His coworkers noticed his sudden cheerfulness. "Oga David, what's making you smile like that?" one colleague teased. He only laughed and said, "Good things, my brother. Life is sweet when you enjoy it." But life wasn't sweet, it was dangerous. He thought Luna was just a woman who admired him, someone far from his world, someone safe to play with. But he didn't know the truth that would soon surprise him more than anything in his life. Luna, on the other hand, seemed to know everything about him. She knew when he left home, what kind of car he drove, what his favorite food was, even what time he usually fell asleep. When he asked her once, "How do you know so much about me?" she only replied with a laugh, "Maybe I just pay attention better than others." He didn't notice the clues hidden in her words. Meanwhile, Adaora began her quiet investigation. She remembered the night she found his phone unlocked and saw Luna's messages. The name still burned in her mind. So, when David went to work, she opened her laptop and made a new social media account, not with her real name but a simple one, Nora. She searched for Luna, the same username she had seen on his phone. And there she was, a profile with a single flower as a picture and very few posts. Adaora scrolled through the photos but there wasn't much to see, only random pictures of sunsets, food and books. Still, she followed the account quietly and waited. Days passed. She watched as Luna posted cryptic messages like, "Some men don't know what they have until they lose it," or, "Secrets are sweetest when they belong to someone else." Adaora read each one with mixed feelings, anger, sadness and even a strange kind of curiosity. But she stayed silent. She didn't confront David. She didn't argue. She smiled, cooked his meals, took care of the children, and waited for the right time. David thought her silence meant peace. He believed she was still blind to his actions. He didn't know that Adaora had grown stronger than ever. Then one night, while David was in the shower, his phone buzzed again. Adaora glanced at the screen. It was a message from Luna. "I miss your smile. When will we meet again?" Her heart pounded. She opened the message and scrolled up. There were dozens of chats, some flirty, some tender. But one message caught her eye. "Maybe someday I'll show you who I really am." Adaora read it again and again. "Who I really am." It was then that she decided to play the same game. That week she began changing too. She wore new dresses, styled her hair differently, and wore a light perfume. When David noticed, he said, "You look nice, my dear. What's the occasion?" She smiled and said softly, "Just trying something new." He didn't realize she was preparing him for something. Every night, Adaora watched him text Luna. Sometimes she would glance at him and ask, "Are you working late again?" He would nod, not meeting her eyes. "Yes, work is crazy these days," he'd say. She would smile and whisper, "You're working too hard. Don't forget to rest." But inside she was burning. Still she waited, patient as a shadow. One Friday evening, David told her he was traveling for a business meeting in Lagos. Adaora nodded calmly. "Travel safe," she said. After he left, she called her friend Amaka, who worked at the same bank. "Can you check if there's really a meeting in Lagos this weekend?" An hour later, Amaka called back. "No meeting, Ada. The office is closed till Monday." Adaora's hands trembled slightly, but she smiled. "Thank you, Amaka." That night, while David believed he was being clever, Adaora already knew where he was going, to meet Luna. But she didn't rush to stop him. Instead, she prepared something that would open his eyes completely. She printed a few pictures from their family album. The ones where he was smiling with their children, the one from their wedding day, the one where Adaora held his hand under the tree near their house. She placed them in a small brown envelope, sealed it, and wrote one short note inside. "Sometimes the person you betray is the one who knows you best." Then she smiled faintly and whispered to herself, "Let the truth come to you, David." When David reached his destination the next evening, a quiet restaurant on the edge of town, he waited for Luna. She had promised to finally show him her face. He sat at the table nervously, checking his phone, his heart beating faster. Minutes turned into an hour. He ordered a drink, still waiting. Then a waiter approached him. "Sir," he said, handing him a small envelope. "A lady asked me to give you this." David frowned. "A lady? What did she look like?" The waiter shrugged. "She wore a scarf. I didn't see her face clearly." David opened the envelope slowly. Inside he found the pictures of his family, Adaora and the children smiling, and the note. He froze. His hands trembled as he read the message again. His throat went dry. "Sometimes the person you betray is the one who knows you best." His eyes widened. He looked around the restaurant, his heart pounding, his mind racing. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. Luna's strange knowledge, her quiet tone, her deep understanding of his life. And as the waiter walked away, David finally understood something he was never meant to forget. The evening air in Abuja carried a light chill, and the city lights glowed softly against the night sky. David was in his room, standing before the mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. His reflection smiled back at him, confident, charming, eager. He checked his phone again. "Meet me at 7 p.m. at La Rosa restaurant. I can't wait to finally see you again. Luna." His heart raced as he read the message for the 10th time. He had waited for this moment for weeks. Luna had always refused to show her face before, saying she wanted the right moment. And now that moment had come. He sprayed a bit of perfume on his shirt, combed his hair neatly, and looked one last time in the mirror. "Tonight," he said to himself quietly, "I'll finally meet her." Adaora watched him from the corner of the living room as he picked up his car keys. He smiled at her briefly, a guilty, nervous smile. "I'll be home late," he said. "There's a client dinner." She smiled back softly. "All right, dear. Drive safe." Her calmness made him uneasy, but he brushed it off. He didn't notice the faint look in her eyes, a mix of pain, strength, and something else he couldn't name. As he drove through the city, David played soft music in his car. His thoughts raced between excitement and guilt. Part of him knew what he was doing was wrong, but he convinced himself it was harmless, just a bit of fun. "It's just conversation," he whispered to himself. "Nothing serious." But deep down he knew it was more than that. When he reached the restaurant, the place was glowing with warm lights. Couples filled the tables, laughing and talking softly. A waiter led him to a corner table by the window. The city lights outside made everything look beautiful and quiet. He checked his watch, 6:55 p.m. She would be here any minute. He looked around, his heart beating faster. Every woman who walked in made him sit up, expecting it to be Luna. He could almost imagine her, tall, elegant, with the same playful tone she used in her messages. He had even pictured how she might smile when she saw him. At exactly 7:10 p.m., the waiter walked over and placed a glass of water in front of him. David nodded, smiling. "Thank you." He looked down at his phone and saw a message pop up. "I'm here." He looked up quickly. The door opened. A woman stepped in, wearing a simple black dress and a light scarf. Her walk was calm, graceful. For a second he couldn't see her face clearly. Then she looked up, and his world stopped. It was Adaora. David froze in his seat. His hand tightened around the glass, and the smile on his face faded slowly. The music in the restaurant seemed to fade into silence. His heart pounded so loudly that it felt like everyone could hear it. Adaora walked calmly toward him, her steps slow and steady. Her face was soft, but her eyes were sharp, too sharp. She stopped at his table, pulled out the chair across from him, and sat down. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. David swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. "Adaora," he whispered. His throat felt dry. "What are you doing here?" She folded her hands on the table, her voice calm and even. "I could ask you the same thing, David." He blinked, his mind spinning. I was just..." He stopped. There was no lie that could save him now. "Wait, you said you were Luna?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, David. I'm Luna." The words hit him like thunder. His mouth went dry, his hands trembled slightly. You were the one texting me?" he asked, his voice breaking. Adaora looked straight into his eyes. "Yes. Every message. Every word." David leaned back in his chair, his thoughts crashing into each other. All the late-night conversations, all the laughter, the messages he thought were secret, they all came rushing back. He had told Luna things he had never told anyone. He had complained about Adaora, not knowing that it was Adaora herself on the other end. His stomach twisted painfully. How could you do that?" he stammered, his voice shaking between shame and disbelief. She tilted her head slightly, her voice soft but firm. "The question is not how, David. The question is why you made me." Her words cut deep. David looked around the restaurant, at the couples laughing, at the waiter pouring drinks. Everything suddenly felt heavy, unreal. He wanted to disappear, to wake up from what felt like a bad dream. But this was no dream. This was his doing. Adaora took a deep breath. "You think I didn't see the messages? The perfume? The late nights? I knew long before you did." David's eyes dropped to the table. "Adaora, She raised a hand gently. "Don't lie, David. Please." Her tone wasn't angry, it was worse. It was calm, tired, and full of disappointment. He looked at her again, his face pale. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he whispered. She sighed. "But you did. You hurt me every night you looked at your phone instead of me. Every time you walked out that door with another woman in your thoughts." David's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, but no words came. The truth was too heavy to carry. Adaora leaned back, her voice trembling now. "Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't that you were talking to someone else. It was that I had to become someone else for you to see me." Her eyes glistened with tears, but she didn't let them fall. David sat still, feeling smaller than he ever had. His pride, his confidence, his charm, all gone. "Adaora," he whispered, "I thought you didn't care anymore. You were always quiet. I thought you stopped seeing me." She shook her head slowly. "No, David. I didn't stop seeing you. You stopped seeing me." Those words sank into his heart like a stone thrown into deep water. Silence filled the table again. Outside, the street lights flickered softly. A song played faintly in the background, slow and sad. Finally, Adaora stood up. She picked up her small purse and looked at him one last time. "Now you know who Luna is," she said quietly. "I just hope one day you'll understand why I had to do this." David stared at her, lost, broken. "Adaora, please, don't go," he said. His voice cracked, his eyes begging. She gave a faint smile, not of joy but of peace. "Goodbye, David." Then she turned and walked away. He watched her until she disappeared through the door. The chair across from him sat empty now, but the space felt heavier than before. The waiter came by, asking softly, "Sir, would you like to order?" David shook his head, unable to speak. He looked down at the table where Aurora had sat, and there, beneath her empty glass, he found a small folded note. His fingers trembled as he opened it. "If only you had looked closer, you would have known it was me all along." David's chest tightened. The lights blurred before his eyes as he sat there, realizing how blind he had been, not to his wife's love but to his own foolishness. For the first time he understood what it meant to truly lose someone, not because they left but because he pushed them away. And now, sitting alone in the same chair where his lies had been exposed, David whispered her name under his breath. Aurora. The music played on. The lights dimmed. And for the first time in his life, David felt what it meant to be truly alone. The air inside the restaurant felt thick, like it was holding its breath. The soft music in the background seemed far away now, swallowed by the silence between David and Aurora. For a long time neither of them spoke. They just sat there, husband and wife, two people who had shared a home, a life and years of love, now divided by a secret that had finally come into the light. David's hands trembled slightly as he tried to form words. "Please, I can explain," he said, his voice breaking. His lips quivered, his pride gone. His usual confidence, the one everyone at the bank admired, had melted away completely. Aurora looked at him, her eyes calm but full of pain. She raised her hand gently, stopping him before he could continue. "Don't," she said softly. Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that hurt more than shouting ever could. "You had a wife who loved you," she continued, her voice shaking slightly now. "A woman who cooked for you, prayed for you, waited for you every night. You wanted a stranger. So I became that stranger, to show you who you really are." David's breath caught in his throat. The words cut deep, slicing through all his excuses and lies. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He looked down at the table, his eyes fixed on the edge of his glass, unable to meet her gaze. His heart pounded hard in his chest. She went on, her voice still calm, still painfully gentle. "Do you know how it felt, David? Every night I watched you smiling at your phone, thinking you had found someone better. You would walk past me, the same woman you once promised forever, and all I could do was smile. Not because I was fine, but because I wanted to see how far you would go." David's shoulders slumped. His hands clasped together tightly on the table. "Aurora," he said in a whisper, "I was foolish. I didn't mean—" She interrupted him again. "You didn't mean to? Or you didn't think I would find out?" He flinched at her question. "I didn't think," he began, but she shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "That's the problem. You didn't think. You stopped thinking the moment you started hiding your phone. You stopped thinking when you looked into another woman's words for comfort. You stopped thinking when you made me feel like I wasn't enough." The sound of her voice, calm but full of truth, made his eyes sting. He blinked fast, trying to hide the tears that threatened to fall. "I thought I was just—" He took a shaky breath. "I thought I was just talking. I didn't think it was serious." Aurora gave a small, sad smile. "Talking becomes feeling, David. Feeling becomes betrayal. You didn't cheat with your body, but you cheated with your heart. And that hurts even more." David closed his eyes and a single tear rolled down his cheek. "I was wrong," he whispered. Aurora nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "You were." For a few moments, neither of them said anything. The sound of laughter from another table filled the space briefly, a cruel reminder of how far apart they had grown. David finally looked up at her. His eyes were red. "Can you forgive me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Forgiveness is not the problem," she said quietly. "I forgave you long before tonight. But trust, David, trust is not something I can give you back so easily." He nodded slowly, his head dropping again. He knew she was right. Trust, once broken, was not something that could be glued back together overnight. "I don't know what came over me," he said softly. "Maybe I was just bored or lonely. I don't know. I thought I needed excitement. But now I see I already had everything I needed at home. I just didn't see it." Aurora's face softened, but she didn't smile. "You didn't see it because you weren't looking," she said. "You were chasing something you thought was new, but it was empty. You traded real love for an illusion." Her words lingered in the air. David reached across the table slowly, his hand trembling as he tried to touch hers. "Aurora," he said, "I love you. I swear I never stopped." She looked at his hand, then at his face. Her lips pressed together. "Love isn't just words, David. It's what you choose when no one is watching. He let his hand fall back to his lap. His heart felt like a weight in his chest. She took a deep breath and stood up slowly. The chair scraped softly against the floor. David's eyes followed her every move, afraid she was walking away forever. "Where are you going?" he asked quickly, his voice trembling. Adeora looked down at him, her face calm but firm. "Home," she said. "I've said what I needed to say." He stood up too desperate. "Please, Adeora, don't go like this. I can change. I promise I can be better. Just give me another chance." She paused, her eyes searching his face. Then she said quietly, "Some lessons, David, are learned in silence." Her words hit him harder than anything she had said before. He froze, realizing what she meant. He wanted to stop her, to beg her again, but something in her eyes told him not to. It wasn't anger or hate, it was something deeper. It was final. She picked up her small purse, straightened her scarf, and began walking toward the door. Each step felt like a piece of his world was breaking away. David stood there, helpless, his hands shaking slightly. His throat tightened as he whispered, "Adeora?" But she didn't turn back. He watched as she walked out of the restaurant and disappeared into the night. When the door closed behind her, David sat back down slowly. The table felt too big now. The chair across from him, once filled by the woman he had taken for granted, sat empty, a painful symbol of everything he had lost. He ran his hand over the table where she had rested her palm just moments ago. It was still warm. He stared at it for a long time, remembering every word she had said. "You wanted a stranger. So I became that stranger, to show you who you really are." He whispered the words to himself again and again, each time feeling them cut deeper. The waiter came by to clear the table. "Sir, should I bring the bill?" he asked quietly. David nodded without looking up. "Yes," he said softly. When the waiter walked away, David sat there in silence. He looked out the window at the city lights, at the cars passing by, and wondered how one man could lose so much without realizing it until it was too late. He thought about his children, about how Adeora would tuck them in every night while he was out pretending to be busy. He thought about the meals she had cooked, the prayers she had whispered for him, the love she had given him freely, all while he looked elsewhere for something he already had. Tears filled his eyes again. He wiped them quickly, ashamed. For the first time in a long time he felt truly small, not because someone had scolded him but because he had finally seen himself clearly. He paid the bill and walked out into the cool night. The wind brushed against his face but it didn't calm him. His heart was heavy. As he got into his car, he looked up at the stars and whispered, "Some lessons are learned in silence." He started the engine and drove home slowly, the road ahead blurry through his tears. Days turned into weeks, and the silence in David and Adeora's home felt heavier than ever. The once warm laughter that used to echo through the living room was now replaced by quiet voices and soft footsteps. The children noticed it too, the way their father looked at their mother with eyes full of regret, and the way their mother smiled without truly smiling. David had never felt this kind of emptiness before. He tried everything he could think of. Every morning he left small notes on Adeora's dressing table, words of apology, words of love, promises that he would change. He brought home flowers, sometimes her favorite lilies, other times roses, but they sat untouched in the vase until they withered. He called her name softly every time she walked past, but she would only nod or answer with a short, "Yes, David." She wasn't angry anymore. That was the strange part. She was calm, polite, and gentle. But her calmness was worse than anger. It reminded him that something inside her had closed off. At night, when the house was quiet, David would sit alone in the living room. The same couch where he once texted Luna now felt like a place of punishment. He looked at his phone often, remembering the secret chats, the laughter, the lies, and how foolish he had been. He thought about how Adeora must have felt pretending to be that woman, watching him fall for her all over again but under a false name. He hated himself for it. One morning, as Adeora got ready for work, David walked into the room with a small box. "Adeora," he said softly. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. He opened the box, and inside was a silver bracelet engraved with her name. "I know I can't undo what I did," he said, his voice trembling, "but I want you to know that I'm trying to be a better man." She looked at the bracelet for a moment, then closed the box gently. "David," she said quietly, "I believe you want to change. But change isn't about gifts or words. It's about time." He nodded slowly. "I understand." She picked up her bag and walked past him, leaving him standing there, still holding the small box. At work, Adeora tried to focus on her duties, but her thoughts often drifted back to David. She had seen his efforts, How he had started waking up early to make breakfast for the children, how he drove them to school with a smile, how he no longer came home late. He didn't talk much anymore and he didn't hide his phone. There was a quiet humility in him now that hadn't been there before. Every evening he prayed before bed. She would hear his voice from the living room, low and sincere. Sometimes he prayed for forgiveness. Sometimes he just thanked God for giving him another chance to make things right. At first, Adaora thought it was just guilt. But over time she noticed that his prayers didn't stop. They became a part of his life, a part of who he was becoming. One Saturday morning while she was washing dishes, she heard laughter from the backyard. She wiped her hands and looked outside. David was playing with the children, running after them, pretending to be a monster as they screamed and giggled. It was the first time in months she had seen him laugh, really laugh. Something in her heart softened. Later that evening when he came back inside she said, "You look happy." He smiled a little, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I forgot how good it feels to just be with them," he said. "I missed too many moments." She nodded quietly and went back to cooking. But for the first time she didn't feel cold toward him. The next few weeks passed gently. The distance between them began to shrink, not quickly but little by little. They spoke more, sometimes about simple things like the children's school or the rising price of food. David didn't try to force her to forgive him anymore. He simply tried to show her that he had changed. He stopped checking his phone at night. He helped her with dinner. When she looked tired, he offered to wash the dishes. When she fell sick one weekend, he made pepper soup for her, sitting beside her bed as she rested. He didn't need to say, "I love you," every day. She could see it in his actions now. One Sunday evening the family went to church together for the first time in months. During the service, David held Adaora's hand lightly. She didn't pull away. He glanced at her and for the first time she smiled back at him, not fully but enough to give him hope. After the service as they walked to the car, he said softly, "Thank you for coming with me." Adaora looked at him. "It's not about coming with you, David. It's about seeing if we can walk together again." Those words stayed in his heart for days. David continued to prove himself. He became more patient, more humble. His colleagues at the bank noticed it too. He no longer bragged or flirted. He simply did his work quietly. Even his boss commented, "You've changed, David. You seem more focused." He smiled and said, "I just learned what really matters." At home, Adaora began to see that the man standing before her was not the same one who once hid behind a phone screen, chasing shadows. This man had learned, painfully, slowly, what love truly meant. One evening after dinner, David found Adaora sitting on the porch. The children were asleep and the night air was cool. He sat beside her silently, afraid to break the peace. After a while he spoke. "Adaora," he said softly. She turned to look at him. "I don't know if I deserve another chance, but I just want to say thank you. You didn't leave me even when I gave you every reason to." She looked at him quietly, her eyes thoughtful. "I stayed," she said, "because I wanted you to see what you were losing. Sometimes the best way to teach someone is not through anger but through silence." David nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "You did teach me," he whispered. "You showed me what real love looks like, patient, honest and strong." Adaora smiled faintly. "If only you knew sooner who Luna was," she said softly, almost as a whisper. David lowered his head, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I know," he said. "If only I knew sooner." They sat there in silence for a while, listening to the sound of the crickets in the night. The moonlight fell gently on them, soft and forgiving. Finally Adaora reached out and took his hand. It was a small gesture, but for David, it meant everything. He looked at her, his heart full, and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me." She nodded, her eyes warm. "Just don't forget the lesson," she said. "I won't," he promised. The night breeze brushed against their faces as they sat side by side, two people who had walked through pain, mistakes, and silence, and somehow found their way back to understanding. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the same as before. But it was real. And for David that was more than enough. As he looked at Adaora under the quiet stars, he knew that he would spend the rest of his life proving that he had learned. He squeezed her hand gently and she didn't pull away. That small moment, that quiet forgiveness, was worth more to him than anything else in the world. And for the first time in a long time David felt peace.